It's one thing to die, but it's another to be deliberately targeted, hunted, and silenced forever. Assassinations are not just killings. They are chilling messages meant to shake nations, crush movements, or settle blood-soaked vendettas. From world leaders struck down in public to journalists gunned down for exposing the truth, these murders reveal the darkest corners of power and revenge. Today, we're diving into 5 of the most horrifying assassinations ever, where history turned on a single bullet, blade, or bomb, and the world was left reeling in shock.
April 14th, 1865. Abraham Lincoln was enjoying a play at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C.
The night of April 14th, 1865, was supposed to be one of relief and celebration. Just 5 days earlier, General Robert E. Lee had surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse, effectively ending the Civil War. Washington, D.C. was alive with parades, bonfires, and joy as citizens looked to President Abraham Lincoln as the man who had held the Union together through its darkest hour. That evening, Lincoln decided to attend a play at Ford's Theater with his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, and their guests, Major Henry Rathbone and Clara Harris. It was a rare moment of leisure for a president who had borne the crushing weight of war. But as Lincoln laughed at the comedy Our American Cousin, death crept silently just feet away. John Wilkes Booth, a famous actor and Confederate sympathizer, slipped through the theater's back door, armed with a single-shot Derringer pistol and a hunting knife. Booth knew the building well. He had performed there many times. He waited for the audience's laughter to crescendo, then pushed open the door to the presidential box. In an instant, he aimed his pistol at the back of Lincoln's head and pulled the trigger. The sound of laughter was pierced by the crack of the gun. Chaos erupted. Rathbone tried to stop Booth, but was slashed deeply in the arm with the knife. Booth leapt from the box to the stage below, breaking his leg as he landed. Still, he raised his bloody dagger and shouted, "Sic semper tyrannis," Latin for "thus always to tyrants," before hobbling off into the night. Lincoln, unconscious but still alive, was carried across the street to the Peterson House, a modest boarding house. There, doctors worked desperately, but the wound was fatal. Through the long night, cabinet members, generals, and his grieving wife watched over him. At 7:22 a.m. on April 15th, the 16th President of the United States drew his final breath. Secretary of War Edwin Stanton famously declared, "Now, he belongs to the ages." What made Lincoln's assassination so horrifying was not just the brutality of the act, but its timing. At the very moment the nation had begun to hope for healing, it lost the man best suited to lead it. Booth's larger plot had aimed to decapitate the U.S. government entirely, targeting Vice President Andrew Johnson and Secretary of State William H. Seward as well. Seward was viciously stabbed, but survived. Johnson's attacker lost his nerve. Still, the bullet that struck Lincoln altered history. The assassination sent shockwaves around the world. Citizens wept openly in the streets. Church bells tolled across America. Lincoln, who had guided the country through its bloodiest conflict, would never see Reconstruction, never oversee the reintegration of the South, never fulfill his vision of malice toward none with charity for all. Instead, the U.S. plunged into uncertainty under Andrew Johnson, whose leniency toward the defeated Confederacy left scars that would last for generations. It was supposed to be an ordinary evening in the quiet village of Kushtyovskaya, the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked, where families gathered around dinner tables, where the biggest disturbance might have been a stray dog barking at night. But on 4th November 2010, that illusion shattered forever. In one house, warm lights glowing, children still awake in darkness arrived in the form of a gang that locals had whispered about for years. A gang protected so deeply by corrupt officials that people joked they were the real government. Except nothing about them was funny. What happened next still haunts Russia. 12 people were slaughtered in a single night. A wealthy farmer, Server Amitov, his family, 4 children, their visiting friends, and everyone inside that home became a target. Some were stabbed, Some were strangled. Others were shot. The brutality was so extreme that investigators later said even seasoned officers struggled to process the scene. And here's the part that chilled the entire nation. This wasn't a gang war. This wasn't revenge between criminals. These were civilians, innocent families, children. This was a message from men who believed they could kill anyone they wanted and walk away untouched. The alleged leader behind it all was a man named Sergei Tsapok, a local businessman, a former politician, and according to prosecutors, someone who ruled the village with fear for almost a decade. Residents described him as untouchable. The police turned a blind eye. Officials protected him. People were so terrified that they stayed silent even as intimidation, extortion, beatings, and disappearances piled up. And then the massacre finally pushed everything into the light. Suddenly, the entire country was watching. The media descended on the village. Survivors spoke about years of fear. Other towns and villages began confessing their own stories of harassment, threats, corruption, running deeper than anyone realized. The Kushtyovskaya massacre ripped open a truth the government desperately avoided. Organized crime hadn't disappeared after the 1990s. It had adapted, blended into local power structures, and thrived. The trial that followed was gripping and devastating. Tsapok and several gang members were accused not only of the killings, but abduction, rape, and years of violence committed in plain sight of authorities who did nothing. Even their downfall felt eerie. Before Tsapok died of a stroke in prison in 2014, 3 of his close accomplices committed suicide, 2 of them just days apart. It was as if the story refused to end quietly, as if the darkness that hung over Kushtyovskaya had one final gasp left. Documentaries, TV shows, and investigative reports followed, but none could fully capture the shock of that night. Even political analysts later admitted the massacre disrupted Russia's carefully constructed narrative, the idea that chaos belonged to the wild 90s, and that under new leadership, order had returned. Yet, here was a modern village, devastated by a gang so protected and so confident, they believed they could butcher families without consequence. And for years, they were right. The Kushtyovskaya massacre wasn't just a crime, it was a national awakening, a reminder that silence is dangerous, corruption is deadly, and sometimes the monsters people fear the most don't hide in shadows, they live next door, shaking hands with politicians, smiling for photographs, and ruling through terror while everyone pretends not to see.
Police in Russia say one of the main figures in the country's organized crime community has been gunned down in Moscow. Aslan Usoyan controlled a criminal group.
If there was ever a name that made the criminal world hold its breath, it was Aslan Usoyan, known to all as Grandpa Hassan. To the untrained eye, he was just another elderly man wandering the streets of Moscow. But behind the closed doors of power, he was a giant, his influence stretching from the icy streets of Moscow to the mountains of the Caucasus, and deep into the remnants of the Soviet Empire. On a cold January afternoon in 2013, someone decided that Giant would finally fall. It happened in broad daylight, the kind of killing that freezes a city in place. Usoyan stepped out of a restaurant he had frequented for years, a place where deals were made and enemies carefully watched. Then came the sound, a sharp crack, followed instantly by another. Before anyone could react, Usoyan stumbled and collapsed. A sniper had been waiting patiently in a nearby apartment, rifle silenced, every shot calculated. Shell casings were later found near a window, mute testimony to the meticulous planning behind the attack. Usoyan had cheated death before. Hits had come and gone, but this time there would be no second chance. He died in the ambulance long before reaching the hospital. Word of his death spread like wildfire, not only through Moscow but across every corner of the underworld where his name carried weight. This wasn't just a murder, it was the fall of a dynasty. Usoyan's power had never been ordinary. From Soviet Georgia to Moscow, the Urals, Siberia, Uzbekistan, and Sochi, he commanded respect, fear, and loyalty wherever money and influence flowed. He was one of the most influential thieves-in-law of his time, a man whose decisions reshaped criminal empires. And with power came enemies, many who had waited decades for the chance to strike. His life was a constant battlefield. businessmen disappeared, rival bosses were gunned down, and entire criminal clans clashed from Yekaterinburg to Tbilisi. These weren't petty turf wars. They were wars between empires. One of his fiercest rivalries was with Georgian crime boss Terio Oniani, a feud that allegedly led to a series of murders, including hits on Usoyan's lieutenants working on Sochi's Olympic construction projects. Even legendary figures like Vyacheslav Ivankov, known as Yaponchik, fell in the shadow of Usoyan's world. Killed by a sniper in 2009, Ivankov's funeral bore a massive wreath signed "To Our Brother" from Grandpa Hassan, a chilling message of loyalty, or perhaps a warning. Usoyan had survived another close call in 2010, when a bullet tore into his stomach. The police even mistakenly announced his death, fearing his enemies would return to finish the job. Yet he lived. 3 more years of outmaneuvering assassins, controlling empires, and keeping the underworld in line. And then the sniper finally arrived. The moment he died, analysts warned of chaos. Younger bosses would scramble to carve up his empire. Rival Georgian factions would move in. Blood on the streets, whispered the experts. For once, there were no doubts. Suspicion immediately fell on longtime enemies like Oniani and Rovshan Janiev, though no one was ever brought to justice. As with most underworld murders, the truth was buried beneath layers of grudges, secrecy, and silent vendettas. Even in death, Usoyan stirred controversy. His family tried to fly his body to Tbilisi, only for the airport to refuse the plane. No one ever got a clear answer why. What is undeniable is this: the sniper's shot didn't just kill a man, it ended an era. Grandpa Hassan, one of the last titans of the Soviet-era criminal world, was gone, and with him, the balance of the underworld shifted forever. On a hot summer morning in Nara, Japan, crowds gathered outside Yamato Saidaiji Station, eager to hear from Shinzo Abe, the longest-serving prime minister in Japanese history, a man whose leadership had shaped modern Japan. He wasn't just another politician. To many, he was a symbol of stability in a world growing more uncertain by the day. At 67, though no longer in office, Abe remained a giant in Japanese politics, his voice still commanding respect across the nation. And that morning, he stood on a small platform, speaking with the calm confidence of a man who had addressed countless rallies before. Then, in a moment that seemed impossible in a country famed for its safety and strict gun laws, everything changed. From the edge of the crowd, a man stepped forward with a crude, homemade weapon, something no one even recognized as a firearm at first. The first shot rang out like a firework, confusing those nearby. Abe turned instinctively, his face registering surprise, but before his guards could react, the second blast thundered through the square. This time, the pellets struck him in the chest and neck. The former prime minister staggered, his hand rising as if to steady himself before collapsing face first onto the street. The crowd screamed, security lunged, and within seconds, one of the most shocking acts of political violence in modern Japanese history had taken place. For a country where shootings are so rare they make front-page news even when non-fatal, the assassination was unthinkable. Shinzo Abe was airlifted to the hospital, doctors battling to save him for hours, transfusing 100 units of blood in a desperate fight, but the wounds were too grave. At 5:03 p.m., the announcement came. Abe was dead. The entire world reeled. The assassin, 41-year-old Tetsuya Yamagami, was seized on the spot. His motive stunned the nation as much as the act itself. Yamagami wasn't a foreign agent or a radical revolutionary. He was a man consumed by a personal grudge. His family had been torn apart by the Unification Church, a controversial religious movement tied for decades to Japan's conservative politicians. His mother's devotion had bankrupted the family, leaving him bitter and broken. To Yamagami, Abe wasn't just a former prime minister. He was a symbol of that political-religious alliance, one of the most powerful figures to ever support the church. And so, he decided that killing Abe was the only way to strike back. What followed was chaos, outrage, and uncomfortable truths. For decades, whispers had surrounded the ties between Japanese leaders and the Unification Church, but they were largely ignored. Abe's grandfather, Nobusuke Kishi, had helped foster the church's influence in Japan, and the connections ran deep within the ruling Liberal Democratic Party. After the assassination, the lid blew off. Politicians were forced to admit links, cabinet ministers confessed to accepting support, and Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's government scrambled to contain the fallout. Public trust plummeted. Demonstrations grew. Suddenly, the death of Abe, intended as a single act of vengeance, was unraveling the very political establishment he once led. The shock spread beyond Japan. And then came the haunting thought, had this been preventable? Security lapses became glaring in hindsight. The shooter had walked right up behind Abe, within meters. With a bulky weapon, no one stopped. The first shot was dismissed as a strange noise, giving him time to fire again. Police chiefs resigned in disgrace, admitting failure. In the end, Abe had died not just because of one man's hatred, but because the system designed to protect him had faltered at the worst possible moment. On September 27, 2022, Japan held a rare state funeral for Shinzo Abe. Thousands lined the streets as his motorcade passed, some waving flags, others silently weeping. The event was broadcast worldwide, cementing Abe's place in history, not just as a prime minister, but as the victim of an act that shattered Japan's illusion of safety.
Police in Russia say one of the main figures in the country's organized crime community has been gunned down in Moscow. Aslan Usoyan controlled a criminal group which trafficked drugs and weapons and ran clandestine businesses.
If there was ever a name that sent a chill through the criminal underworld, it was Aslan Usoyan, the man they called Grandpa Hassan. To the public, he looked like any quiet old man. But in the world behind closed doors, he was a force whose influence stretched from Moscow to the Caucasus and deep into the remnants of the Soviet Empire. And on a cold January afternoon in 2013, someone decided his reign was over. It happened in broad daylight, the kind of moment that makes an entire city pause. Usoyan stepped out of a central Moscow restaurant, the same place he handled business for years. Then a sharp crack echoed from across the street. A second followed. Before anyone understood what was happening, he collapsed. The sniper had been waiting in a nearby apartment building, using a suppressed rifle, choosing his moment with almost frightening precision. Shell casings were later found near a window, silent proof that the killer planned every detail. Usoyan had survived hits before, but this time there was no escape. He died in the ambulance. Long before reaching the hospital, news spread instantly, not just in Moscow, but across every corner of the world, where his name meant power or fear. His death wasn't seen as just another killing. Many believed it could shake the entire criminal landscape. To understand why, you have to understand him. Usoyan wasn't an ordinary mob figure. His career stretched from Soviet Georgia to Moscow, the Urals, Siberia, Uzbekistan, Sochi, wherever power and money flowed. He was one of the most influential thieves-in-law of his era, a man whose decisions rippled across borders. And with influence came enemies who waited decades for an opportunity like this. His life was a chain of violent power struggles, businessmen vanishing, crime bosses getting shot, criminal clans clashing from Yekaterinburg to Tbilisi. These weren't simple turf wars. They were battles between empires. One of his biggest feuds was with Georgian crime boss Teriel Oniani. Their rivalry allegedly sparked a wave of killings, including hits on Usoyan's lieutenants working on the lucrative Olympic construction projects in Sochi. Even high-profile crime figures like Vyacheslav Ivankov, Yaponchik, were caught in this deadly web. He too was killed by a sniper in 2009. When he died, a massive wreath appeared at his funeral signed, "To our brother, from Grandpa Hassan," a symbol of loyalty, or maybe a warning. Usoyan barely survived another assassination attempt in 2010, when he was shot in the stomach. Police even announced his death temporarily, fearing his attackers would return to finish the job. But he lived for 3 more years, and then the sniper came. The moment Usoyan died, analysts warned the underworld could erupt. Some said younger bosses would carve up his empire. Others predicted the long-running war with Georgian factions was far from over. Experts whispered of blood on the streets, and for once, no one doubted it. Suspicion immediately fell on old rivals like Onyani and Rovshanjaniev, though no one was ever convicted. As with most underworld murders, the truth was buried under layers of grudges, secrets, and silent battles. Even in death, Usoyan caused controversy. His family attempted to fly his body to Tbilisi, but the airport refused the plane. Why? No one ever agreed on an answer. What people do agree on is this: his assassination marked the end of an era, a final sniper shot that took down one of the last great Soviet-era crime bosses and reshaped the balance of the underworld forever.
Sir David Amess, who was knighted in 2015, was an MP for 38 years, latterly as the representative for Southend West, where he held a majority of 14,000 at the last general election.
On the morning of October 15, 2021, Sir David Amess, a Conservative MP with nearly 4 decades of service, arrived at Belfair's Methodist Church Hall in Leigh-on-Sea, Essex. For him, this was routine, a constituency surgery where ordinary people could walk in, shake his hand, share their problems, and know that someone in power was listening. He had built his entire career on being approachable, a man of the people. But that very openness, the thing his community admired most, would be the reason his life ended in horror. Inside the church hall, Amess sat down to meet his constituents, unaware that among them was a man carrying a knife, waiting for the moment to strike. As conversations unfolded, the attacker suddenly emerged, lunging forward and stabbing Amess repeatedly in front of stunned onlookers. Panic filled the small hall. People screamed, staff rushed for help, and paramedics arrived within minutes. An air ambulance landed nearby, but his wounds were too severe. Despite desperate attempts to save him, David Amess was pronounced dead at 1:13 p.m. The man arrested at the scene was Ali Harbi Ali, a British citizen who later admitted he was inspired by the ideology of Islamic State. He had planned the killing for years, scouring the names of MPs who voted for UK airstrikes in Syria, and even scouting out other targets before settling on Amess. What makes this even more chilling is the cold calculation. Ali had researched more than 250 MPs, studying their movements, waiting for a chance to strike at the heart of British democracy. For the public, the murder was unthinkable. Amess wasn't a prime minister or a cabinet minister surrounded by layers of security. He was a local MP who held no senior government office, someone who spent his weekends speaking with the people of Southend West. He had campaigned passionately for animal welfare, supported Brexit, and fought tirelessly to have Southend granted city status. He was known as kind, approachable, and deeply committed to his Catholic faith. That such a man could be targeted while doing the very thing that defined him, listening to his people, sent shockwaves far beyond Essex. Tributes poured in almost instantly. Prime Minister Boris Johnson, opposition leader Keir Starmer, and colleagues from across the political divide stood united in grief. Vigils were held, church bells tolled, and communities mourned a man who had never shied away from meeting face-to-face with those he served. To his constituents, he was not just an MP, he was a neighbor, a familiar figure who always made time for a chat. But behind the mourning lay something darker. Amess himself had once written in his autobiography that the killing of Joe Cox in 2016 had spoilt the great British tradition of the people openly meeting their elected politicians. He feared that one day MPs would no longer be safe in the simple act of engaging with their communities. In a haunting twist of fate, those very words became a prophecy of his own death. Ali Harbi Ali later stood trial at the Old Bailey, showing no remorse. He smirked in court, declared he had no regrets, and justified his act as part of a twisted ideology. The judge called him a cold, calculated, and dangerous individual, sentencing him to life in prison with no chance of release. For Amess's family, there was no relief in the verdict. "We shall never get over this tragedy," they said. Their grief only deepened by the thought that a husband, father, and grandfather was stolen from them in such a brutal way. In the weeks that followed, tributes to Amess turned into legacy. Southend was officially granted city status, fulfilling one of his greatest political campaigns. Colleagues called him a martyr for democracy, a reminder that in an age of political division, violence must never silence debate. On the morning of October 25, 1957, Manhattan's Park Sheraton Hotel seemed like any other bustling corner of the city, its barbershop filled with the quiet hum of clippers and the occasional chatter of patrons. But inside, Albert, the Mad Hatter, Anastasia, one of the most feared men in the American underworld, was about to face a fate so shocking it would be remembered for decades. Known as the ruthless head of murder Inkros, Anastasia had commanded a legion of killers and orchestrated countless hits, earning nicknames like the One-Man Army and the Lord High Executioner. Yet, in a cruel twist of irony, he would die not on the battlefield of the streets, but in a barber's chair, surrounded by mirrors and the faint scent of hair tonic. Anastasia's life had been a relentless climb through the ranks of organized crime. Born Umberto Anastasio in Calabria, Italy, he came to America as a teenager, landing on the Brooklyn waterfront, and quickly learning how to navigate a world ruled by violence, loyalty, and betrayal. He survived arrests, assassination attempts, and prison stints, his reputation cemented by his icy ruthlessness and unmatched brutality. Anastasia's rise had been meteoric, from working with Joe Masseria and Lucky Luciano during the Castellammarise War to becoming the feared enforcer and later boss of the family that would eventually bear his name. He left a trail of bodies in his wake. Despite his fearsome reputation, Anastasia's power made him enemies. His volatility and greed, coupled with his disregard for certain mafia protocols, made him a target for ambitious rivals. Vito Genovese and Carlo Gambino saw an opportunity to remove a volatile and unpredictable force from their path, and they orchestrated one of the most audacious hits in mafia history. On that fateful October morning, Anastasia, oblivious to the deadly trap, relaxed in the barber's chair. Two men, their faces obscured, stormed in, shoving the barber aside, and unleashed a storm of bullets. Anastasia tried to rise, only to collapse into the mirrors and towels around him, his life extinguished in seconds. The image of a mob boss, so accustomed to controlling life and death, reduced to a helpless figure in a barbershop, was seared into the public consciousness. The aftermath was as dramatic as the killing itself. No one was ever charged, though whispers in the underworld pointed to Gambino and Genovese pulling the strings, possibly with Joe Gallo leading the gunmen, cheekily dubbing themselves the Barbershop Quintet. Anastasia's funeral was small and unceremonious. The church refused to sanction a Catholic service for a man whose life had been defined by bloodshed. His empire was swiftly absorbed, with Gambino rising to power and reshaping the mafia landscape, proving that even the most feared men are mortal, and that in the world of organized crime, betrayal is only ever a heartbeat away. Anastasia's death wasn't just another hit, it was a chilling spectacle. A reminder that in the ruthless world of the mafia, no throne is safe, and the most terrifying figures can fall in the most mundane of places, leaving the world to gape at the shocking theater of their demise.
Vyacheslav Ivankov. Born in the Soviet Union in 1940, Ivankov was a Russian mafia boss known as Yaponchik, meaning Little Japanese for his Asian-esque features, and was rumored to have ties with Russian state intelligence.
Vyacheslav Yaponchik Ivankov wasn't just another name in the Russian underworld. He was a legend, a ghost, a myth people whispered about from Moscow to New York. To some, he was a criminal mastermind. To others, a survivor of a world where the rules were written in blood. And for decades, it seemed like nothing and no one could touch him. Ivankov's story began far from the glamorous cities he would later haunt. Born in Soviet Georgia and raised in Moscow, he grew up scrappy, fierce, and unafraid of chaos. He never pretended to be a saint. He fought, he hustled, he climbed from a young wrestler to a street enforcer, slipping through the cracks of the Soviet system until he was finally crowned a Vor v Zakon, a thief in law. That title wasn't handed out lightly. It marked you as royalty in a kingdom built on smuggling, extortion, and an unbreakable underworld code. Ivankov's life was a cycle of arrests, escapes, and reinventions. Authorities tried locking him up in the 1980s, but somehow powerful figures always seemed to intervene. By the early 90s, he was free again, and the chaos of the collapsing Soviet Union pushed him toward a new frontier, America. When he arrived in New York in 1992, people couldn't believe it. How does a man with a decade-long criminal reputation walk into the U.S. on a business visa claiming he's working in film? But Yaponchik moved like someone protected by shadows. Some said he came to rule Russian organized crime in the States. Others claimed he was running from enemies back home. Whatever the truth, he established himself in Brighton Beach, and not quietly. He extorted, he negotiated, he led. FBI agents monitored him constantly, insisting he had a hand in everything from narcotics to extortion rings. Yet he carried himself like someone who didn't fear prison, death, or the government. That confidence didn't last. In 1995, the FBI finally grabbed him, accusing him of extorting millions and carrying multiple passports. He denied the criminal myth built around him, claiming the real criminals were in the Kremlin and intelligence agencies. But prison didn't break him. If anything, it added to his legend. Even behind bars, he stayed connected, protected, and respected. When he was deported back to Russia in 2004 to face old murder charges, many expected him to disappear into the past. Instead, he walked free within a year after witnesses claimed not to recognize him. It was as if the universe kept giving him one more life. But in the underworld, always come due. On July 28, 2009, as Ivankov stepped out of a Moscow restaurant, the world that once feared him struck back. A single shot from a sniper, cold, distant, merciless, tore through the night. The rifle was later found abandoned in a nearby car, a signature of professionals who expected their message to be understood without words. For 73 days, Ivankov fought for his life, and for 73 days, gangsters, rivals, and allies waited to see if the old king would rise again. But this time, death didn't bargain. On October 9th, 2009, the man who had cheated fate for decades finally succumbed. What happened next showed just how deep Ivankov's influence ran. His funeral drew hundreds of gangsters from across the former Soviet world, entire criminal clans sending wreaths and tributes. In the years that followed, police across Europe and Russia hunted those suspected of ordering or benefiting from the assassination. Operations stretched from Moscow to Greece to Spain. Arrests were made. Even after death, Ivankov's legacy continued shaping the criminal world. His closest ally, Alexei Petrov, stepped into the vacuum. The empire Yaponchik built splintered, absorbed by larger syndicates, proving that even legends cannot control what happens after they're gone. On 14th and February 2005, Beirut's skies were clear, the streets alive with their usual traffic. Rafik Hariri, billionaire businessman and former prime minister, had rebuilt much of war-torn Beirut and symbolized the dream of a Lebanon free from Syrian occupation. But as his motorcade passed the St. George Hotel along the Corniche, that dream was obliterated in a blinding flash of fire and steel. A Mitsubishi truck packed with nearly a ton of explosives ripped through the convoy, carving a crater 30 feet wide, shattering windows for blocks, and setting cars ablaze. Hariri, his bodyguards, and 21 others were killed. Over 200 were wounded. The heart of Beirut was left burning, and the city was left asking who wanted Hariri dead. Hariri had recently broken with Damascus, openly opposing President Bashar al-Assad's grip over Lebanon. Months earlier, Assad had allegedly threatened him. Lahoud is me. Opposing him is opposing Assad himself. I will break Lebanon over your head if you stand in my way. His murder ignited fury. Hundreds of thousands flooded Martyrs Square, demanding an end to Syria's nearly 30-year military presence. The Cedar Revolution forced Syrian troops to withdraw by April 2005, a change Hariri's death achieved in weeks. Investigations later pointed to Hezbollah operatives. Phone records and surveillance footage exposed a coordinated network, but direct proof linking Hezbollah's leadership, or Syria, to the attack never surfaced. In 2020, Salim Ayash was convicted in absentia, yet the mastermind remained hidden. Even investigators weren't safe. Wissam Eid, who uncovered key phone evidence, was assassinated in 2008. Brigadier General Wissam al-Hassan in 2012. Anyone close to the truth seemed doomed. Today, Hariri's grave near the Mohammed Al-Amin Mosque is a shrine. His assassination remembered every February 14th, not with roses, but with grief. What makes his death most horrifying isn't only the scale of destruction, it's that justice was never served. In Lebanon, no leader is safe when they stand against the forces that thrive in the shadows.
The bullets that ended Big Paul Castellano's life last night may very well have been a payoff for getting into such trouble with the feds. As the reputed head of the Crime Commission and the godfather of the Gambino family, his appearance in court every day and the preoccupation with his defense were bad for business.
On the chilly evening of December 16, 1985, the streets of Midtown Manhattan were about to witness one of the most notorious hits in mafia history. Big Paul Castellano, the powerful boss of the Gambino crime family, stepped out of his limousine outside Sparks Steakhouse, unaware that the shadows around him were alive with danger. Beside him was his loyal underboss, Thomas Bellotti, both men completely unprepared for the ambush that was about to unfold. Within moments, a crew of gunmen surged forward, firing relentlessly at close range. Castellano fell, his life extinguished in a hail of bullets, while Bellotti was cut down just as quickly. Watching from a car across the street, John Gotti, a rising capo with ambition burning hotter than ever, observed the chaos he had orchestrated and seized control of one of New York's most feared crime families. Castellano's life had been anything but ordinary. Born Constantino Paul Castellano in Brooklyn in 1915 to Italian immigrant parents, he grew up learning the family trade of butchering while secretly absorbing the lessons of loyalty and intimidation that would define his later life. His father's connections to the early Mangano crime family paved the way for Castellano's rise, and by the 1940s, he had become a respected capo under Albert Anastasia. He survived the violent underworld, building a reputation for ruthlessness and unwavering adherence to the code of omertà, refusing to betray accomplices even to avoid prison. As the years went on, Castellano transformed from a street-level operator into a businessman with a criminal edge. He turned legitimate enterprises into money-making machines, using intimidation and careful alliances to dominate the concrete business and the Teamsters Union. He built a lavish mansion on Staten Island, a fortress that mirrored his taste for grandeur and control. Yet, for all his wealth and power, Castellano's style, meticulous, detached, and far removed from the streets, would prove to be his undoing. Tensions had been brewing within the Gambino family for years. Castellano's underboss, Agnello Neil Della Croce, had commanded loyalty from the Manhattan faction, while Castellano's Brooklyn-based faction focused on business dealings and white-collar crime. Many saw Castellano as out of touch with the gritty realities of the mob, and resentment simmered, particularly among ambitious figures like John Gotti. Gotti's frustration reached a boiling point over disputes about hijackings at JFK Airport and Castellano's refusal to endorse drug operations, the most lucrative trade in the city. The final spark came when Della Croce died on December 2nd, 1985. Castellano's failure to attend the funeral insulted the Manhattan crew, and his choice of Bellotti as underboss only deepened the division. Conspirators like Salvatore Gravano plotted in secret, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. When a tip revealed that Castellano would be dining at Sparks Steakhouse on the evening of December 16th, everything fell into place. The hitmen took their positions, concealed in plain sight, while Gotti and Gravano observed from a nearby car, their hearts pounding with anticipation and the knowledge that history was about to be rewritten in blood. As Castellano stepped from his car, bullets tore through the night. His head was struck with precision, and Bellotti fell beside him, a silent witness to the carnage. The street echoed with chaos, and by the time the dust settled, two powerful men were dead, and a new era of the Gambino family had begun. Castellano was buried without the honor of a Catholic funeral, a symbol of both his notoriety and the world he had ruled with an iron fist. Gotti's ascent to power marked a violent, dramatic shift in New York's criminal landscape, a reminder that in the underworld, loyalty is fragile, and even the most untouchable figures can fall in an instant.
Journalist Yelena Kostyuchenko is having a first look at what used to be the office of Anna Politkovskaya, her colleague, shown here in archive footage. Now it's a museum in her honor.
It was an October afternoon in Moscow. In a quiet apartment block in the center of the capital, a woman stepped into the elevator, balancing bags in her hands, just moments away from the safety of her own front door. That woman was Anna Politkovskaya, one of Russia's bravest journalists, a relentless truth seeker who had built her career on exposing the things the Kremlin wanted hidden. Seconds later, 4 gunshots rang out. By the time the doors slid shut, she lay lifeless on the floor, a pistol tossed beside her body like a signature left behind. It was October 7th, 2006, Vladimir Putin's birthday, a coincidence that would haunt the world. Politkovskaya was no ordinary reporter. She had spent years covering the bloody Chechen wars, documenting the disappearances, the torture, the mass graves. She wrote about the civilians caught between Russia's military and the brutality of Chechen warlords, never flinching even when her words painted her own government as complicit in crimes against humanity. Her book, Putin's Russia, accused the president and his inner circle of dragging the nation back into a Soviet-style abyss, suffocating dissent, feeding fear, and treating citizens like expendable pawns. She knew the risks of saying such things out loud, and yet she kept going. In one of her final essays, she admitted, "Otherwise, it can be death, the bullet, poison, or trial. Whatever our special services see fit." Those words would prove prophetic. The threats against her had been mounting for years. In 2004, on her way to Beslan to help negotiate during the school hostage crisis, she collapsed on a plane after drinking poisoned tea. In Chechnya, soldiers once staged a mock execution to terrify her into silence. Anonymous voices promised her rape, promised her death, promised her disappearance. Friends urged her to leave Russia. Former KGB officer Alexander Litvinenko even warned her. The danger was imminent. She refused. If anybody thinks they can take comfort from the optimistic forecast, let them do so, she wrote. But it is the death sentence for our grandchildren. She believed her country's future depended on voices like hers refusing to be silenced. And yet, in the end, the silencing came. 4 bullets, one of them to the head, executed with chilling precision. Investigators called it a contract killing, designed to send a message. The timing was impossible to ignore. Her assassination fell on the exact day of Putin's 54th birthday, just 2 days after Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov's birthday celebrations. Many wondered, was this a macabre gift, a demonstration of loyalty to power? Or was it simply the perfect moment to deliver maximum humiliation to a government already despised by her pen? The shockwaves spread instantly. Colleagues at Novaya Gazeta, the independent paper where she worked, didn't mince words. She had been killed for her reporting, nothing else. International governments demanded justice. Crowds gathered with candles outside the Russian embassy in Helsinki, in Moscow, in New York, in Paris, in London. More than 1,000 mourners filed past her coffin at the Troyekurovsky Cemetery, but not a single senior Russian official appeared at her funeral. It was as though the state preferred to erase her existence rather than acknowledge her sacrifice. The investigation that followed felt less like a pursuit of justice and more like a performance staged for the world. Suspects were arrested, then acquitted, then retried. Chechen men were paraded through courts. Former police officers were accused of orchestrating her murder. In 2014, 5 men were convicted, 2 given life sentences. And yet, the most important question, who ordered the hit, remains unanswered to this day. Powerful figures were whispered about, connections to the FSB hinted at, but the truth was buried beneath layers of secrecy. One of her alleged killers, Sergei Kadzikurbanov, was even pardoned in 2023 after fighting in the war in Ukraine. It was as if the system itself was mocking her memory, recycling killers back into service. On December 2, 1993, the streets of Medellin held their breath. Pablo Escobar, the man who had ruled Colombia's drug trade with a combination of ruthless cunning and violent ferocity, was cornered. For years, Escobar had seemed untouchable, his Medellin cartel controlling the flow of cocaine across the globe, his wealth staggering, his influence absolute. Thousands had died under his orders, Yet he moved through his city with a sense of invincibility that had terrified authorities and captivated the public alike. But now, the walls were closing in. After months of evading capture, Escobar was finally traced to a modest house in the Los Olivos neighborhood. His location revealed through a desperate phone call to his family. Colombian Special Forces, the elite search block, surrounded the building, their weapons ready, hearts pounding with the knowledge that the man they were about to confront had orchestrated more deaths than most could imagine. Escobar, ever resourceful, tried to escape, climbing across the rooftops like a hunted animal. But this was no jungle to disappear into. This was a city under siege, and every step brought him closer to the end. Bullets tore through the air, striking him in the torso, his feet, and finally his head, ending the life of the man who had declared that they would never catch me in the great life. There is still debate over who fired the fatal shot, the Colombian police, a sniper from a rival paramilitary group, or even Escobar himself in a desperate final act. But the result was the same. The king of cocaine, the man who had laughed at the law and orchestrated an empire built on terror, lay dead. Escobar's death did not just mark the fall of one man, it signaled the collapse of the Medellin cartel and the end of an era of unparalleled violence in Colombia. Yet, even in death, he remained a legend. Tens of thousands attended his funeral, mourning a man who had been both a monster and, in the eyes of some locals, a Robin Hood figure who had built schools, soccer fields, and housing for the poor. He was buried in Monte Sacro Cemetery, leaving behind a legacy as infamous as it was unforgettable, a reminder that power, no matter how absolute, can always be brought to its knees. If there's one name that still sends a chill through anyone who followed the Russian underworld of the 1990s, it's Alexander Superkiller Solenik. People said he could shoot with both hands, hit multiple targets in seconds, and walk through chaos like he was born in it. But the part nobody expected? That one day, this unstoppable force would simply vanish, only to reappear as a corpse in a quiet suburb of Athens. Solenik's path into darkness didn't start with crime. It started with talent, wrestling, weapons, discipline. He was fascinated by everything that could turn a normal boy into something dangerous. But life pushed him in strange directions. He joined the Soviet Army, worked briefly as a police patrolman, and then fell hard. By the late 1980s, he landed in prison on serious charges he always insisted he didn't commit. And this was the moment everything changed. Rumors from that period say inmates marked him for death when they realized he'd once worked in law enforcement. Instead of breaking, he fought. Stories say he held off entire groups of prisoners, earning respect in a world where respect keeps you breathing. But prison bars never held him for long. Not once, but twice, Solenik escaped, slipping through the system. Each time he resurfaced, he was more dangerous, more determined, and more closely tied to rising crime groups. By the time he returned to Kurgan, he wasn't just a fugitive, he was a recruit, a weapon, a man hired to settle scores that others were too afraid to handle, and he handled them, one by one. In the early 90s, Russia's underworld became a battlefield, and Solenik became one of its most feared players. He was linked to hits on major crime figures, men surrounded by bodyguards, men who thought they were untouchable. He walked into crowded clubs, streets, parking lots, and pulled off assassinations that stunned even veteran investigators. Some say he was methodical. Others say he was emotionless. Either way, his name rose to the top of Russia's most wanted lists, and police across Moscow hunted him relentlessly. But even arrest didn't stop him. During one takedown, officers brought him into a station and somehow missed the Glock 17 he had hidden under his coat. Before anyone could react, shots rang out. Officers fell. Solenik ran. More gunfire erupted outside. He was wounded, but still fighting, still moving, still impossible to capture. It took being cornered for him to finally surrender, and even then, it felt more like a pause than a victory for law enforcement. Once again, locked inside Moscow's infamous Matryoshkaya Tishina prison, he should have been finished. But if there was one constant in Solenik's life, it was that walls couldn't hold him. In 1995, he staged another escape, the kind you only see in heist films. A mannequin was left under his blanket. A guard, allegedly working for the mob, slipped him a weapon and rope. And then he was gone, rappelling down the prison walls into the night like he had never been there at all. This time, he didn't hide in Russia. He disappeared completely. Months later, whispers out of Athens started spreading. A mysterious Russian man in luxury villas, a private security force, parties, deals, and dangerous alliances. When the truth came out, authorities realized what they were dealing with. Solonik had rebuilt his empire in Greece. Reports say he had around 50 men under him, access to weapons stockpiles, and contracts stretching into Europe. For a man who had spent years hunted, he was suddenly living like a king. And then, without warning, the story took its darkest turn. On January 31st, 1997, Greek police were tipped off about a body found near Athens. No documents, no clear identity, just a corpse of a man who had clearly lived a violent life and died an equally violent death. The face looked familiar, too familiar. Authorities soon confirmed what everyone feared. The man lying there was Alexander Superkiller Solonik. Rumors spread instantly. Some claimed a rival gang had finally caught up with him. Others believed he was eliminated by people he trusted. Early reports suggested he had been strangled, not shot, not stabbed, but quietly removed in a way that sent a message. Later, accounts pointed to another feared hitman, Sasha Soldat, as the one allegedly responsible. Whether it was betrayal, revenge, or a contract ordered from thousands of miles away, one thing was clear. Solonik died surrounded by people he thought were allies, and the chaos didn't stop there. In the days that followed, Greek authorities raided his villas. What they found looked like the set of a crime thriller. Weapons hidden everywhere, documents hinting at upcoming hits, including one allegedly planned in Italy. The empire he built crumbled overnight, exposing networks and operations no one even knew existed. If there was ever a figure who embodied both fear and fascination in the post-Soviet underworld, it was Rovshan Janiev, the man people whispered about as Lankaransky. His story didn't begin with power, or money, or crime. It began with a teenage boy watching his father, a police officer, murdered by the very criminals he was investigating. And at just 17, standing in a courtroom where his father's killer smirked and threatened his family, Rovshan snapped. He pulled out a gun and shot the man dead in front of the judge, the jury, and the cameras. That moment sealed his fate long before anyone called him a gangster. From there, the spiral was fast. He served 2 years in prison, but the world he walked back into was already shaping around him. By 2002, he had been crowned as a thief-in-law, a respected title in the criminal hierarchy supported heavily by Talish networks who saw him as one of their own. Every step he took into the underworld seemed fueled by a mixture of vengeance, ambition, and survival instinct. His rise wasn't subtle. In the early 2000s, he allegedly shot a well-known Baku crime boss in broad daylight. He was beaten so brutally afterward that doctors claimed he developed a mental illness, a detail that helped to get him released early. But the minute he was free, he disappeared from Azerbaijan and surfaced in Moscow. And that's where everything changed. In Moscow, Rovshan didn't just join the criminal world, he shaped it. He built power fast, controlling Azerbaijani gangs, running rackets, and stepping into battles that stretched across borders. His influence was strong enough that some believed he was absorbing entire ethnic networks under his authority. With power came enemies, and one of them was Aslan Usoyan, Grandpa Hassan, one of the most feared figures in Russia's criminal history. Their rivalry became the stuff of underworld legend. When a sniper tried to kill Usoyan in 2010, eyes immediately turned to Rovshan. He was arrested shortly after in Ukraine, a country where he was already rumored to have criminal interests and even refugee status. When Usoyan was finally killed in 2013, many again whispered Rovshan's name, even though he insisted he had nothing to do with it. And when one of Rovshan's closest allies, Asta Margulia, was gunned down just weeks later, it only intensified the rumors that a silent war was underway. For years, Rovshan was seen everywhere and nowhere at once. Italy, Ukraine, Dubai authorities kept tracking him, reporting him to Interpol, accusing him of everything from money laundering to bribery to document forgery. He was even declared dead once in 2013, a report his own brother publicly denied. It was almost like Rovshan had become a ghost. Alive, dead, untouchable, hunted, all at the same time. But even ghosts slip up eventually. On the night of 17th of August, 2016, in the stylish Beşiktaş district of Istanbul, Rovshan returned from a trip to Dubai. He climbed into his luxury Range Rover, an Azerbaijani license plate still gleaming on the back, completely unaware of what waited for him. As the SUV pulled away, a hail of automatic gunfire tore through the vehicle. His driver died instantly. Rovshan was rushed to the hospital, but the wounds were too deep, too many. Hours later, he was gone. His assassination shook the underworld. This wasn't some dark alley hid in Moscow. This was Istanbul, a major international city struck by a coordinated, professional attack. It sent one message loud and clear. No one was untouchable. And if there was any doubt that Rovshan had become a mythic figure, his funeral ended the debate. His body was flown back to Azerbaijan on a private jet owned by billionaire Mubaraz Mansamov. When the plane landed, more than 25,000 people gathered to mourn him. A criminal to some, a folk hero to others. Writers and analysts later said people admired him because he did what ordinary men wished they had the courage to do: avenge wrongs, defy enemies, challenge giants. If there was ever a name that carried both fear and fascination through the post-Soviet underworld, it was Rovshan Janiev, whispered about as Lankarensky. His story didn't start with money or power. It started with blood. As a teenager, he watched his father, a police officer, gunned down by the very criminals he had sworn to stop. And at just 17, standing in a courtroom while his father's killer smirked and threatened his family, Rovshan snapped. He drew a gun and shot the man dead, right there, in front of the judge, jury, and cameras. That single act cemented his fate long before anyone called him a gangster. From that moment, his descent into the underworld was rapid and merciless. He served 2 years in prison, but the world outside was already taking shape around him. By 2002, he had been crowned a thief-in-law, a respected title in criminal circles, supported by Talish networks who saw him as one of their own. Every move he made seemed driven by a lethal mix of vengeance, ambition, and survival instinct. His rise was anything but quiet. In the early 2000s, he allegedly gunned down a prominent Baku crime boss in broad daylight, only to be beaten so severely afterward that doctors claimed he developed a mental illness, a story that helped secure his early release. The moment he walked free, he vanished from Azerbaijan and re-emerged in Moscow. And there, Rovshan didn't just join the criminal world, he began reshaping it. He quickly consolidated power, controlling Azerbaijani gangs, running vast rackets, and expanding his influence across borders. Entire ethnic networks seemed to fall under his authority, but with power came enemies, and among the deadliest was Aslan Usoyan, the legendary Grandpa Hassan. Their rivalry became the stuff of underworld legend. When a sniper nearly killed Usoyan in 2010, Rovshan's name was immediately whispered. He was soon arrested in Ukraine, a country where he already had criminal interests and rumored refugee status. When Usoyan was finally assassinated in 2013, speculation swirled again, linking Rovshan, though he denied any involvement. And when one of his closest allies, Astamir Gulia, was gunned down weeks later, the whispers of a silent war only grew louder. For years, Rovshan was everywhere and nowhere at once. Italy, Ukraine, Dubai, Interpol kept tabs on him, accusing him of money laundering, bribery, and document forgery. In 2013, he was even declared dead, only for his own brother to publicly refute the claim. He had become a ghost, alive, hunted, untouchable, mythic. But even ghosts leave traces. On the night of August 17, 2016, in Istanbul's stylish Beşiktaş district, Rovshan returned from a trip to Dubai. He climbed into his luxury Range Rover, Azerbaijani plates gleaming, unaware of the storm waiting for him. As the SUV moved through the streets, a hail of automatic gunfire shredded the vehicle. His driver was killed instantly. Rovshan was rushed to the hospital, but the bullets had done their work. Hours later, he was gone. The assassination sent shockwaves through the underworld. This wasn't a shadowy Moscow alley or a secret corner of Azerbaijan. This was Istanbul, a major international city, hit with precision and coordination. The message was clear. No one, not even a man as legendary as Rovshan, was untouchable. And if anyone doubted his mythic status, his funeral erased it. His body was flown back to Azerbaijan on a private jet owned by billionaire Mubariz Mansimov. More than 25,000 people gathered to mourn, a crowd where criminals, admirers, and ordinary citizens blended together. To some, he was a ruthless gangster. To others, a folk hero. A man who avenged wrongs, defied enemies, and dared to challenge giants when the world whispered to stay silent.